So welcome to today's episode of the Coaching Outdoors podcast. I am in sunny Scotland for the first time outdoors for the first podcast for a while. And Anna-Marie is in England, and we are joined by a wonderful guest, Claudia. And I'm very excited about this podcast because Claudia is going to be talking today all about research into coaching outdoors and into the benefits of outdoor coaching. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I would like to roll over to Claudia and ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. My name is Claudia Geratz. I'm originally from Germany, but I live in Ireland for the last 14 years. And I'll probably tell you a bit more about my background in this episode, but what is important to know right now is that I'm reconnecting with nature for the last 3 to 4 years, and I'm making a conscious effort to go out there and enjoy life and enjoy nature. And I'm also a coach and a positive psychologist, and a big part of my work now happens in the great outdoors around Ireland. And I've also done a study on it. So this is why I'm here. So thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Perfect. Welcome. This is just a slightly different episode. And I mean, this is like, Alex is just like so excited about this. And I am as well. I'm more of a hands up, I'm a practitioner. So I'm sure you guys will be geeking out on the data and everything. Though a question that we ask all of our guests as we get started is, what is your earliest memory of being outdoors, and why do you enjoy being outside so much?
Yeah, great question. I love that when you ask your guests. So I thought about this for a bit as well, and I have many memories. My childhood of growing up in Germany, like being outdoors in the garden or playing in the street, that was just like part of growing up. So there is a lot of memories, but none of them are really like super special. So I thought about the special moments, and that brought me back to my grandma's garden, where I probably have my earliest memories of consciously connecting with nature through helping her in the garden. She was a very keen gardener. She had always an abundance of flowers in her garden, and the neighbors were always stopping by and admiring it. And she grew this all from seeds every year, right? She started the process in the basement, and she made me part of it when I was really young. So that's my earliest connection and memory with nature, where I consciously like took part in preparing the soil and caring for the flowers and the plants, and then watching it grow through the seasons. So yeah, that was probably something that I felt, these moments of calmness and appreciation of beauty and life around me, even though at the time I wouldn't have used these words, right, to describe it. But I remember it was always moments where I was very calm. I felt very connected to my grandma. And as I got older, I got to appreciate these moments in my own garden now as well.
It is lovely, the number of people we've asked that question to, and so many have gone back to a memory of being with their grandparents, more specifically their grandparents, I think, than any other relative. And often, talking about being in the garden, growing things, or playing with their, a grandparent in a garden or in a seaside setting, on holiday. And it really is, it's one of my earliest memories as well, with my granny in our garden. And it just really kind of sparks those memories and those feelings, doesn't it? So it really kind of brings those feelings back to the fore, which is why we love asking that question, because although everybody gives a different story, there's so many similarities and connections between people's sort of memories of being with nature as well. So now time to bringing it to the current time. What's your coaching backstory? So you mentioned you've been coaching for a little while now, and coaching outdoors for a little while now. What brought you to coaching, and specifically the coaching outdoors? What's your backstory, and how did you and how do you work with your clients in the outdoor space?
Yeah. Great question. So my first career, like for the first 20 years of my professional life, I worked in tech across Europe, and mainly in Dublin. So it was a very like office-based environment. I was spending most of my days looking into a screen, And that was how I thought life would be like. And I hit a point where I felt like, okay, what's my impact? There was a big question around, is this meaningful, what I'm doing? Is this really connecting me with other people? And I was also, while I was challenged, I was always a bit not challenged in the right way. So I went back to university about 7 years ago, and I did an undergrad in psychology in Ireland, part-time next to work. And within that undergrad, the most fascinating topic of psychology for me was positive psychology. Like, how can we use what we have to make a good life and to help not just ourselves, but also the communities. So naturally, once you probably know that, Alex, once you start studying again, it's a bit like a bug. It doesn't really leave you. So when that was done, I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? And I looked for a master's to continue that journey. And one of the only ones in Europe is the one in UEL and at the University of East London, where they combine positive psychology with coaching psychology. And that was the first moment in my life that I was consciously being put in touch with coaching. And here's a little secret. When I first read the course description, I was like, oh my God, one of these life coaches, I don't want to do that. So I actually had like not the best reaction to it. And then I was like, I'm just embracing it. Maybe I learned something new. And then in the first modules about coaching, I was like, oh my God, this is going to change everything for me. And then the pandemic came. So I experimented with, my first coaching experiments were completely on Zoom. We were all locked up. We were all at home, all across Europe. And I very quickly realized I need to get out of here. Like, I felt really, in Ireland, I don't know if you know about that, the lockdowns were very, very strict. At times we had like a 2-kilometer radius around the house that we could move freely in. So I felt really restricted. I felt really like closed up. And the people I work with are predominantly working in tech. So they also sit at their desk all day long. So I was like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. And I thought maybe I can combine the two. And first I did some walks over the phone, like we were both walking in different locations, and it was mainly audio coaching. But then once it was possible again, with the restrictions loosening up in Ireland, I actually started to invite people who live close to where I am to actually meet outdoors, and that was it. That was me thinking, yeah, this is the future. This is what I want to do, because I felt much better, but I also saw that my clients had, I felt like more empowering conversations than I was able to do on Zoom. So that's how I got to outdoor coaching. I take a breath here.
Oh, and clearly as part of your studying, and the University of East London, I've had a couple of friends who've kind of gone through the course, and really randomly your dissertation supervisor, Julia Papworth, was one of the first people who trained me on one of my basic coach courses back in 2012, I think.
Amazing. The world's so small.
The coaching world is just so small. So clearly as part of your study, you have to pick a topic, and within Coaching Outdoors itself, it's such a huge topic. Like, how do you even pick a title and get started? I know for a lot of people, when they're going around their research, actually getting the title, getting the proposal in, how did you do that?
It is the most daunting part in the research process. So this one came quite easy to me in a way, because when I started embracing the outdoor coaching, I was already enrolled. I was training myself to look at the literature first before I try anything in my practice. So naturally, I looked for the research and the literature around outdoor coaching, because I was wondering, what do I need to pay attention to when I take my clients into the outdoor space, and what are the factors that potentially influence how we behave with each other? And there is like very little research there. There is a lot of stuff around, we know the benefits of being in nature and how good it is for mental and physical well-being, and relaxation and regaining focus and all that. But you can do that just going out in nature. That has nothing really to do with coaching. There's something else happening when you coach. So there was nothing there. So I was like, okay, maybe I have to do it. And then through it's a very research focused and research focused applied course. So we went through all the available literature around what makes coaching special in general, and the biggest factor that we know now that makes coaching very successful is actually the coaching alliance, like how coach and client form a bond, how they trust each other. That's the biggest factor that you can, as a coach, pay attention to make sure that your client has a good experience. So I felt that that's probably a good entry point to the whole outdoor coaching thing, because it's two people walking through the space. There is clearly a relationship forming, and I started to wonder how is that different or similar to when we do Zoom or when we sit in an office space. And this is how I narrowed it down to the topic I wanted to understand how does that relationship between the client and the coach form when we take the conversation for a walk in nature.
So just to give our listeners a little bit of an overview, what is the title of your research that you're working on at the moment?
Okay, so the original research question was how does the Coaching Alliance develop within the outdoor space? So there is the concept of the space that we move through included, but there's also the alliance included. And the title of my study now is called, I'm going to read it out to you, Walking with a Friend, a grounded theory exploring the tripartite relationship between coach, client, and nature in outdoor coaching. So it's a long title, but it has everything in there that is important to, for us to understand what happens when we go outdoors, what happens to us, what happens to the client, what role is nature playing in all of that, and how is it all interconnected. And it was a fascinating journey to find out more about that, because we have a very limited understanding what is special about outdoor coaching. We all have it as practitioners, like when you listen to the other guests on your podcast, everybody has a sense of why this is special, and a lot of people have put some explanation forward. But so far, nobody has really researched that, to build up academic evidence for it and put it into a theory. So that's my humble attempt here.
Well, the one thing I love about research is once you find your little area that you want to research, you can then really just be creative in that space around how you then capture the data, what methodology you use, how you choose to analyze it. And I know being part of your university studies, obviously you have to put all that into your proposal before you start. But as you go along, there are obviously ways to tweak it and things that you can do along the way. So it would be really lovely, and this is where I'm going to get very excited and get very geeky, to share what was your methodology? So what research tools did you use, and why did you choose that particular methodology? And also, what was the analysis that you did, and how did you look at the figures and the data and the content of your methodology afterwards?
That is a very geeky question. So let me try to explain it in a way that somebody who listens to this, who hasn't gone through a research project themselves, hopefully understands. So in social sciences, there are different ways of creating data and analyzing it. And it really depends on your research question and also what's already out there. So for me, once I had my research question and I realized that there is no theory on outdoor coaching out there, it was already predetermined that I have to do a grounded theory. A grounded theory is something that we do when we don't have any comprehensive theory, when we are in the very beginning of understanding a topic or a concept. This is when you would choose an approach like that. And it's a qualitative approach. That means you gather data by either interviewing people or reading through documents, like anything written or spoken word. That's what you use as data. So what I did is I felt very passionate about getting the client perspective in as well, because the studies that we have so far, they often look at the coach's experience and they ask the coaches for input. But it's very rare that even outside of outdoor coaching, in general coaching research, that the client is also being included in the perspective. And I felt from the beginning that I need the client here as well, because everybody was talking about, oh, it's such an equal relationship. I was like, well, if it's so equal, I need to hear from them as well. So I recruited a total of 7 coaching pairs, like a coach and one of their clients. And I interviewed each of them individually for 45 to 60 minutes. I recorded all that, and then I transcribed it. And then I had like 14 long Word documents with like 20 pages each. And then you go through each of these Word documents line by line, and you read through it again, and you give a label to what is actually being described in that sentence. What are the people talking about? How is that impacting their behavior, their thought process, maybe their emotions? How is it impacting each other? So you do a lot of levels of coding, as they call it. It was a whole long process. So like I started in January in 2022, and I finished all of that in June. So you need a lot of time to do that. So I did 1 interview a week. I coded it, and then this informs how I interview the next person. So it's also a very iterative process. You can tweak, as you say, things while you go along. So the more people I interviewed, the more my questions changed, and I could find out more detail in the process. So this is how I went about the data collection. And then you have all these codes, and over time, for me, this kind of, like, you're so deep in this, it kind of, there comes a point when you're like, oh, this is repeating, so this is a theme. Oh, they are also talking about the movement and the side by side, so this is a theme. Oh, they're talking about the weather and the impact on their mood, so this is a theme. So you start finding these patterns in what people are saying, and this is how your themes emerge and develop. And from there, I don't know how much detail you want. From there, I started to build a post-it wall. So in my office space in my house, there is a big wall that's full of post-its still today. And I played around and moved them around to understand, okay, how is that maybe impacting each other, to find the model that I ultimately developed based on that.
I can see Alex nodding and smiling here. So come on, I bet you had a post-it wall. You love your post-its.
Absolutely. I was about to say I had exactly the same. In fact, I had my spare bed, which is a king size bed, was a post-it bed, and the wall behind it was post-its. So I did exactly the same thing. And they were all color coded depending on the theme.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never bought so many different colored post-it notes in my life. And I am a post-it queen, as Anna Marie will attest to. If you go anywhere near my office, there's post-its everywhere. But it's really fascinating to hear your approach, because it's very, very similar to the approach that I took as well. And it really does, as you said, you suddenly have all this humongous amount of data, and you think, where am I going to get any information really from this? But the more you go through it, and the more you do that thematic analysis, the more these clusters of themes just pop out, and you realize that they are really the kind of the common thread that's running through all, if not most, if not all of the people that you talk to. And just circling back around to the question was, so that's the methodology you used, and I personally I loved using it myself. What was the analysis that you did in terms of what were those cluster themes? You mentioned a couple of them that have popped out. So you mentioned movements, walking side by side, and the weather. And what are the other kind of themes that within that analysis that popped out?
So I condensed it to 4+1 themes that kind of encompass everything that happens in outdoor coaching. And this is the space, as in the space where coaching client moves through. It's the trust, and there's different dimensions of trust, so we can go into depth on that as well. There is the movement, so how we move through that space. And then there is a sense of freedom. Again, this is also a multidimensional concept that emerged. And all together, the overall thing, what happens is connection. again, on many different levels. So this is where you bring it down to as few concepts as you can, and this is how you develop your model then. So all the other things that might pop up that I'm going to talk about probably in a few minutes, they all can be categorized into one of these. So we have movement, space, trust, freedom, and all of that together builds connection. So we have lost Anna-Marie now.
No, not at all. I love the research. I love reading it. I love applying it. I wouldn't want to do it. Like, you guys can geek out and spend the time. For me, I'm too busy running for a start. I'm like, how can I do research and fit my running in? Like, this really isn't going to happen. And yeah, I mean, believe me, I've been there, I've done a master's, I've done a dissertation. It was more around teaching as opposed to kind of coaching specifically. And I know that Alex is keen at some point to go back and do a PhD. And for me, I'm just like, the academic world and being immersed within that, I am hands up, I am a practitioner, but we all have our space and our place. And, you know, it was a delight to be a part of your research and to have that hour, which was a really, really reflective session and asking questions. And just for me to be able to explore my practice and kind of maybe question certain things in a way that I hadn't before. So again, and this is a bit shout out to anyone who is listening, like if you are a resolute practitioner, hands up, you can still support the more academic minded people because they need our experiences and our knowledge. And we really want a wide range of people as well, because at the moment it's almost the community is kind of quite small and the size of the groups, of the sample sizes is quite small as well. And actually we want a real diverse across all ages, ethnicities, countries, because that's when we start to get kind of the real data as opposed to kind of quite a small sample size where there could be kind of, I know the same data could just kind of reinforce as opposed to kind of through.
And that's a good point that you are making, like from your own experience, that you found it was a really reflective session, and everybody who was who participated in my research, they were all like, oh my God, this was nearly like a supervision session. So it's very similar to coaching. It's a very non-directive style of questions that I asked, and I suppose every researcher would do the same. So if anybody gets a chance to participate, I know there's a few other people always looking for coaches to interview on different topics. It can even be a benefit for yourself just to have this reflective space and to think about things that you haven't thought about before.
And I think there's a piece around the clients as well, particularly, I mean, you mentioned it earlier about getting the clients into the room. And often I think as a coaching profession, we're always like, oh, we'll ask the coaches. And it's like, well, actually it's the clients. It's like, oh, I can't possibly ask, you know, all my clients. And I think getting them on board and actually really using that alliance and trust and, you know, ultimately asking for their support for the wider coaching profession, I think, you know, it'd be really interesting for people to do more of that in the future. So diving on in, and clearly you spent hours and hours and hours like getting the data, pulling it together, pulling it apart, putting it back together again, making connections, and then the okay, big reveal, and so what?
So I thought for today we could probably I was thinking what would be most beneficial for outdoor coaches to know now at this stage, either for people who are just starting out with outdoor coaching, who find themselves in a similar situation when I started and don't know what's important when they take it out for a walk, and also similarly for coaches who have done this for a long time. So I picked two themes to discuss in more detail today. Trust and movement, because I feel there is a uniqueness about both of these that really is different than a traditional form of coaching. So let's start with the topic of trust. So trust, we know trust is one of the core elements that is needed to form a good and healthy bond between the coach and the client. So this is a key thing for the alliance, right? And trust in the connection with outdoor coaching is, that was most fascinating for me. This starts to build way before your clients even reach out to you. So that was something I was not so aware of. And it starts with two pathways, kind of. So the first pathway is if a client considers outdoor coaching, they are going to stalk you potentially longer than they would do another coach, because they need to have a bit more trust in you, because you're taking them to a place they potentially have never been before. So it's a bit like they need to build up this trust in order to say, okay, I'm going to meet this person that I've never met before in a public space, familiar to me or unfamiliar, doesn't really matter. There's considerations around, oh, can I go away if I don't like it? Is it easily accessible for me? So these kind of things happen way before they even contact you. And then there is another thing that I think we need to pay more attention to as an outdoor coaching community. Nearly all of the people, all of the clients who I interviewed, they describe themselves as an outdoorsy person. So they already come with a certain level of trust in nature. They feel comfortable in nature. They expose themselves to nature. They probably know they feel good when they are in nature. But I also realized that if somebody doesn't have that connection with nature, they probably wouldn't consider us. And while we can say, okay, that's fine, because there is a big pool of people that I can still turn into clients, I started to wonder, like, maybe we need to pay more attention to get these people into the outdoor space, because that's like an extra benefit for them. If they develop a stronger nature connectedness and feel like more empowered to go out in nature and foster that innate connection that we all used to have and kind of lost, I think there is a wider benefit for the client outside of just the coaching space to be had. So I found that one was noteworthy from a point of view. If I'm a practitioner, I probably do things differently if I know that only outdoorsy person tend to contact me. What do you think about that? Is that news to you, or were you aware of that?
It's something that Anna Marie and I have talked about, actually, and you're absolutely right. And it's something I talked about with my dissertation supervisor as well, is, how do you get the right cross-population of people to talk to? And as you said, people who come to outdoor coaching tend to have an affinity to the outdoors naturally. And it showed up in my research as well in a similar sort of way. I think 9 out of 10 of the people I spoke to, about 90% of the people I spoke to, said that they loved the outdoors. And only one person said that they didn't like the outdoors before they started outdoor coaching and came to love it and it became their spiritual home after having outdoor coaching. So it's a fascinating thing to understand, is where and as coaches as well, we are coming to outdoor coaching because we potentially have a love and affinity for coaching for the outdoors as well. So yes, there's an interesting dynamic there that sort of comes to play around where that nature connection and where that personal where your own personal journey and story with the outdoors comes to play in your outdoor coaching practice. It's really fascinating. Yeah.
So we need to keep in mind that this trust building process starts way before the coach and the client actually meet. And once they meet in that space, all of these good things are activated that we experience when we put ourselves into the environment, into the natural environment, right? So you have from a cognitive point of view, people like think clearer, they have better focus, they're more creative, there's more perspective that they generate. So this is all happening. Our mood immediately gets better, and we're like more cheerful and more happy, more open. There's also a confidence element that wasn't very strong across the board, but some people noticed that they felt more confident, and probably because they are walking upright and not like crouching on their seat, so this body posture thing, and all this, like, just by being in nature then transfers into the Coaching Alliance. And I think that for me, at least, this was something that, and also from the people that I interviewed, it was not conscious for everybody. So while we notice a positive benefit on us being in nature, it is not so obvious for everyone that this makes it into this alliance that you're forming with your client. And it's actually a very active ingredient. Just by putting yourself and your client into the outdoor space, you are already doing something positive for the alliance between both of you, right? So this is something we can use more consciously as well. And also that helps a coach, because that's also something every coach said. They trust themselves more once they embrace the great outdoors. So I interviewed coaches who were very in the beginning of their outdoor coaching journey, and I also interviewed coaches who are doing this for quite some time. And in the beginning, I was thinking, from what I heard, that there is a kind of a graduation process, how you work with nature. When you start as an outdoor coach, you hear other coaches saying, oh, nature is an active ingredient in the practice. And when you just start, you're like, really, I just want to make it to the end of this. I can't take notes. I feel like frustrated. I don't know what to do. So over time, when they gain experience, they become more aware of, and you to know that as well, of the environment and what kind of an active role it plays in the whole process. So when you turn that onto the psychological side, basically, as a coach, you're building self-efficacy by going out into nature. It's something out of your comfort zone in the beginning, but over time you will master it. And one reason what all coaches said was very positive for them is that they can't use their usual tools and techniques that they would use when they are doing a Zoom meeting or when they're sitting in an office. And these are no note-taking and not looking at any kind of model of how to do coaching, right? So when you take these two things away from a coach, they have to embrace themselves. They have to be courageous. They have to trust themselves. And a lot of them, upon reflection, said that this is actually a key element why they do a better job, a better form of coaching when they are outdoors. So leave your notes away, even when you do Zoom coaching. Don't take notes. You don't need it, basically. That's the learning.
The notes thing is something that we get asked about so many times. And it's I remember when I started off coaching and they were there as like a safety net.
Yeah.
Kind of like had them and, oh, if pregnant pause, oh, look at the notes. It's like, step away from the notes, let them go.
Yeah.
And have that confidence and trust in yourself that everything will just come together, and using your intuition, it will emerge.
Yeah. And also for the clients, every client said that this was also crucial for them, because we feel judged when somebody else writes notes about what we say. So by taking that away, a lot of clients said that that was one element why they feel the whole experience is far more open, less judgmental, and that allows them to spill the beans much quicker than if you would be sitting there writing notes about what they said.
I love that. I'm just going to emphasize that again. Clients feel judged when we're taking notes.
Yeah.
And that is like, that is an immense takeaway. So if you're listening in, stop taking notes and listen.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because it's almost felt that I think clients almost feel like they're in therapy because you're sat opposite them taking notes. Whereas if you're outdoors walking together, as you said, it's that the alliance changes from a face-to-face to a side-by-side.
Yeah.
And just everything about that dynamic of simply being alongside somebody versus sat opposite them opens not just their understanding of the relationship, but their field of vision as well. So you're not sat opposite them, sort of stopping them being able to see the horizon. You're walking alongside them and they can see everything that's in front of them. And it just, as you said, cognitively, I love the way you described the results there in terms of the cognitive changes that happen when you're outdoors, when you're moving, when you're building that trust and that alliance. The parts of the brain that just open up that aren't necessarily tapped into when you're sat indoors surrounded by four walls, feeling a bit kind of hemmed in. The brain itself physically opens up. Fascinated about the way you describe the cognitive aspects of the results, and the fact that the being outside and side by side physically opens up parts of the brain. What did your research find in terms of that being side by side? Was there any specific theme there around the benefits of outdoors and that being able to be alongside each other?
Yeah, that was the only theme that had been uncovered in previous research like your own. And there was one other study that mentioned the very unique way we move in outdoor coaching, the side by side. You're moving equally at an equal pace, you're moving forward. So I was curious to see like how does this all work together? And there is actually a whole lot of things happening when we walk side by side. So when you stay with the individual, it activates the body-mind connection. So this is when the cognitive stuff happens and we have better ideas, better thinking, creativity, perspective. But on a social level, this whole thing of walking side by side, like every single person I interviewed, no matter if it's like the coach or the client, when they reflected on what is so special about it, they liked it. They said they refer to it as it's like walking with a friend. So I really digged into this. What does that mean, walking with a friend? So ultimately, what happens when you take your client on a walk? They bring all their experience of walking with a friend into your relationship. Usually when you go out in nature and you walk either on your own or you walk with people that you know and you trust. It's usually your friends, it's your family, maybe it's a walking group, but it's a very social activity. You are doing it just for pleasure, for connection. You're not doing it to necessarily work or do some personal development. So they all have very positive, very social connections with that side by side. So that they bring that with them. It's like walking with a friend. Immediately, you're not the therapist, you're not the coach, you're just like, to them, you are the friend. And what that does is it really helps the client to open up. They share. A lot of them reported that they were surprised how much deep stuff they shared that they haven't even shared with their spouses or their closest partners and friends. And when I asked them why they think that happened, they always said it's this combination of being in that space, in that beautiful white space, but also because you have someone by your side, there's no eye contact, but it's like you're walking with a friend and everything is safe. It's safe to speak, it's safe to express yourself. And I found that alone is fascinating, right? But there is a real interesting process happening when you walk with someone side by side, and you probably don't pay attention to that a lot. So everybody needs to pay attention to the pace. So when you walk with someone side by side and the other person is either faster or slower than you will immediately get annoyed or stressed out. It's like, it takes up so much bandwidth up here. It's like, oh my God, why is he so slow? Oh my God, he's faster than me. I can't keep up. And in coaching outdoors, all the coaches pay attention to the pace. But I don't think we know why. It's just like a very instinctive process. So we tend to slow down and we tend to make sure that our client leads the way and goes like, sets the pace basically. And we have to make that, I believe we have to make that process conscious. When the client enters these brilliant coaching moments where something shifts in their mind, and when they have these aha moments, that's when so much brain power is needed that physically people need to stop. Like it has to do with how the brain developed, the cognitive processes for movement and the cognitive processes for thinking are happening in the same part of the brain. So if you have to think a lot, which you do when your mindset shifts, you can't also do walking. You can certainly not do it at a fast pace. So naturally, people would walk very slow and even stop. And a lot of coaches said to me, oh, I let the client lead because that's what we do as good coaches. The client leads the process. But I'm starting to think, and this is something I would like to put out as a debate, to use the pace much more as a tool in outdoor coaching to facilitate these shifts in thinking, to make sure when we notice, oh, the client is coming to that point where something major happens, that we take control and we stop or we slow down and help them to make that mental shift, because we don't have capacity for both. And not a lot of coaches do that, at least not the ones that I interviewed. There were only 2 coaches, and one who uses pace very deliberately and another one who uses the stopping when they notice that the client has a major epiphany. And I think there is a case for using the pace and bringing it down to a very slow pace for the benefit of the client, basically.
Sorry, Anna, you were going to say?
No, so I just kind of remember, it's like some clients who come that I work with, and it's almost the pace is indicative of the way that they move through their life, and they meet you and boof, they're off. It's like, whoa, hang on in there, come rein them back, okay. And it can be quite uncomfortable for a client to shift into that other gear, almost, to actually land and stop and pause, because you are thinking differently. And actually, if you're constantly in that forward thinking space and keeping the tempo high, grounding and settling can be just physically, the sensations that emerge can be quite confronting, and how you're there to accompany them with that. Sorry, Alex.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so it does fascinate me, the conversation around the movement and the pace and the synchronicity of side-by-side walking, and how some clients talk about, getting into that synchronicity quite quickly with their coach, and others, the coaches say they let their clients stomp on ahead when they're having a real moment of, I've got to get something out of my system, so they go stomping off, and the coach is basically, just keeping up just behind them, just keep that safe space so that they're there, but as you said, letting the client set that pace, but at points saying, right, let's stop here for a moment, let's stand, let's reflect, even close your eyes, use some of your other senses, not necessarily your sense of sight. And as Anna Marie said, it can be almost confronting, because that client might not necessarily use pace that way themselves, but actually can gain such benefit from the stop or the slowdown, as you said, the neuroscience that sits behind it around understanding how the brain processes different things in the same part of the brain, and needing that restored attention to be able to do one or the other. You either stomping off or you're standing, really thinking and processing. And I think it's that the more research we can get into this, the more we can get really into the nitty-gritty of why is it happening, how is it happening, and then what's the benefit to us in the coaching community, which moves me on quite nicely to the next question. Is, with this research, it's wonderful, and I'm so glad you've done it, and I can't wait to read it when you're fully written up. But what will the benefit be of your research to the wider outdoor coaching community? Have you got any plans to publish, maybe, or to share or even maybe share a summary of your findings with the wider community?
So I'm thinking of going down the route of publishing it. That takes obviously some perseverance, some time. But I would love to publish it, because I believe, even though we talked about it for nearly an hour now, there's a different quality to it if you read a piece of research and you have it condensed in front of you. So I would love to do it, because I think it could benefit novice outdoor coaches, but also the ones that do this for quite some time. And I also think this could inspire further research in the community. There is a lot of things that I uncovered that I didn't have the chance to go into depth. So for example, a limitation that I had is that 2 limitations. So even though I try to recruit coaches from all over the world, I ended up with a sample of coaches only from the Northern Hemisphere, mainly from the UK, some from Canada, and some from Central Europe. So my sample is not as diverse as I would have liked it to be. And it, from a nature point of view, from what they describe, where they take their clients, it's all relatively similar. It's the kind of how we define beautiful nature in the Western world. It's maybe a forest, it's a green space, there's some water features, it has like a bit of walkways, these kind of things. But nature, and also how people would describe the beauty of nature, might be completely different in other countries of the world, in the southern hemisphere, or in countries where there is more drought. And I have no idea how that affects all these kind of things in outdoor coaching in these countries. So that's something that somebody else really needs to look at, because the space itself is also something that plays a major role in the experience that we are having. And the other limitation is, and I pull it out here now because I know a lot of people are listening, I really encourage more outdoor coaches to participate in these kind of things. It was very difficult for me to find enough people who wanted to contribute. I understand that it's a challenge, and that you will be reserved to invite one of your clients to this kind of research, because you basically open up your dyadic relationship with your client, something very trusting, very special, to someone you don't know. But I can assure you, any kind of research that is done through a university degree, it follows ethical protocol, and there shouldn't be any threat to your relationship that you have with your client. So I felt a lot of coaches were very hesitant. They were very ready to participate themselves, but they were hesitant to bring in one of their clients. So again, please give this another thought if somebody approaches you, because it's really vital for us to understand. And then the other thing is, I would have loved to interview people who do like these immersive experiences, like going for a coaching experience for a day or multiple days. And these people were even more hesitant. And I can only speculate why. I know it's a very niche business model, right? So there's probably also an element of, you want to protect your craft and you want to protect your adventure that you have created for your clients. But I believe it's a different experience if you go for a 60 or 90-minute coaching walk somewhere, or if you immerse yourself for a few days in crazy beautiful places. And I would have loved to get a view on that as well. So maybe next time.
No, thank you. And those are words that, as a coaching community, we really need to take on board. And actually, how can we collaborate more and support each other? And actually, when someone else comes along and does their research, which hopefully there will be soon, let's really embrace them and help out. And I know for me, I kind of got the email and it sat hands up in my inbox for a while, and then I was like, oh yeah, because we're running businesses, there's so many other things going on. And then eventually I reached out and actually, do you still need some support? And yep. And then, again, trying to get a client on board, unfortunately it was too late down that avenue, though at least I was happy eventually to be able to get around and help. So yeah, lesson for us all there. And within that, clearly, the work that you've done has thrown open like a load of topics, and almost, what are you really wanting to dig into next, and like research topics that you might be moving towards?
I don't know if I will do another piece of research. It's a hard process. Like we I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's fascinating what you can learn when you do a piece of research, but it also is very time consuming, and it needs a lot of dedication. I would like to, I don't know, I'm thinking, I've done so much learning now, I've done so much reading, I've done so much research. For me, I feel it's time, I want to have more conversations about this. And I've already started to explore like ideas, and maybe again, this is a call for the community. Like, I would love to have a space where we come together and just, I don't know, an outdoor coaching conference sounds too big, but I mean, we have to start somewhere, right? Where we can like have talks about this in a structured way or in an unstructured way, because there's so much more to uncover. This is what I would much prefer at this stage of my professional career than another piece of research. But yeah, I don't know if maybe we should look into that and do a little bit of an outdoor coaching conference.
This sounds awfully familiar to an episode that we just recorded with Paul Jeffries.
Oh, did you? I didn't.
But it's interesting, clearly, the themes that are coming up, and that there's a demand. So no, it's something that we've bounced about along with other different projects. And yeah, again, a call to the community, like who would want to be involved to help get this kind of set up and started, and is it feasible? You know, 2023 spring, summer, let's get people in the same room and just get people talking. And you know, from the people that we've had kindly give their time as guests on the podcast, you know, everybody has something to say.
Yeah.
So it's very much, I have a belief that we could craft something that would be valuable for people to come. Though, you know, event management and fitting it in, the logistics behind it, you know, let's try to make this happen.
It can even be remote. I mean, to make it accessible for everyone, not everybody has the budget to travel halfway around the world. So I loved all the remote conferences that were happening during the pandemic, because they made it was more accessible for me. So yeah, I would love to get involved. So here, come to me when you're ready.
So just starting to kind of wrap things up, and this is just an invitation for you to share any resources that you found particularly supportive in your research, and then also where can our listeners contact you, as I'm sure they'll be wanting to discover more.
Yeah, so of course this podcast was for me very helpful when I started outdoor coaching. So that's definitely, I need to mention that, right? And from a research perspective, I encourage everybody to, even though you don't need a master's degree or an undergrad to read research, skip over the middle part and read the beginning and the end, and you will have enough information that you need to inform your practice with evidence-based strategies that are proven to work. And I can really recommend, just from my background, to look at the positive psychology research. They have done a lot of research into the benefits of being out in nature, nature-connectedness, how that plays a role, and how being outdoors is really directly connected with our happiness and well-being. So there is a lot of stuff there, and a growing field and more multidisciplinary is ecopsychology. I'm also looking into that, which looks at how spaces impact our behavior, our mood, and our emotions, which is also very relevant to outdoor coaching. Also, like, do you take your clients into the green space, into the blue space, or do you do it in an urban street? It will impact your conversation in different ways. And then, yeah, I recommend connecting with other outdoor coaches, because I've learned so much from just speaking to other outdoor coaches. And there's a lot of good people out there who are open to just have a coffee chat for half an hour, me included. So if anybody wants to speak to me about my research or about anything, doesn't really matter, probably the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. You can find me under my name, Claudia Geratz, and yeah, this will also be the place where I share any kind of things that I can publish or announce on the research.
Well, Claudia, thank you so much for your time today, honestly. And as I said at the start, this has been one of the podcasts I've been really looking forward to. And yes, it is my bag as well, you know, the whole research side of things. And I think what you've shared with us today has been some wonderful insights into not just how to go about doing research, so that, you know, the actual tools, techniques, methodology, thematic analysis, but also the results. And that to me is, I think a lot of our listeners will be really interested in the results side of it. You know, what are those themes that are coming out? And I think the more research that we can do, the more we'll start to see that those themes are you know, very strong throughout lots of research, but also, okay, what's sitting behind them. And I love that, you know, your call to arms, you had a couple of call to arms in there. One around, you know, if you are a coach, please get involved in research. If somebody comes to you and asks you, or if you're a client, or, you know, if you're wanting, if somebody comes to you wanting to get access to your client, you know, be that facilitator to help people actually get to the clients as well, and then leave it up to the clients to make their decision to whether they want to take part in research. And other call to arms there about, you know, doing more research and going into looking into some of the, you know, not just research in the Northern Hemisphere or in Europe, but, you know, what are the similarities and differences in experiences in the Southern Hemisphere, as you said, different parts of the world. You know, we Anna Marie and I have tried to get a really good range of guests on the podcast from all over the world, but there are certain parts of the world which we still haven't been able to tap into and find guests, because we just, we haven't managed to find an outdoor coach in those regions yet. So another call to arms there, if you're listening to this and you're in one of the Southern Hemisphere countries, please get in contact with us. We've had an Australian wonderful podcast with Elle in Australia, but we're always looking for more insight all over the world as well. So thank you so much for that. And just a couple of the aspects that I think your research really highlighted, things like, for me as well, I hadn't even thought about this, about how the alliance starts before they even come to that session. So I love the way you described, they'll be doing some more stalking of you on social media, so they can start to build the trust before they even make contact with you as a coach, to open that conversation around outdoor coaching. And that, to me, that's a whole area that I hadn't even thought about, actually, about how long before a potential client comes to you have they been watching you, and just building that trust to be able to make that contact in the first place. So thank you, that's really lit a fuse in my brain around thinking about that aspect as well. So thank you so much for your time today, Claudia. We really
Thanks for having me. Thanks for nerding out with me.
Oh, anytime. We could go on for hours, but we won't. And yes, so our back catalogue of all of our previous podcasts are on our website, www.coaching-outdoors.com, and you can also find them through our LinkedIn community, the Coaching Outdoors podcast, and Claudia's episode will be available along with all of our previous ones as well. And yet again, just thank you so much, Claudia, for your time today, and we appreciate it, and hopefully we'll speak to you again in the near future and find out how your coaching practice evolves based on your research.
Thanks for having me, ladies.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard,
Like it,
share across your network,
and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor podcast.
thanks so much in advance for your support.